All right, let's get into the anecdotal matchup between the Commanders and the Giants here anecdotally. The intriguing matchups between the two teams, right? You've got a couple that stand out to me, but the first one would be Josh Connorley Jr. at right tackle against Brian Burns on the edge. Burns last year had his highest pressure total that he's ever had, 66 pressures. This is a guy who is one of the more underrated, I think, pass rushers in the NFL because the sack total doesn't always show his impact. If you look at his numbers, Danny, he had 12.5 sack season. He's never had 10 any other year. So it's mostly 8.5 sacks. It's kind of Brian Arakpo-ish numbers.
Yep.
But he is super impactful, and he's going to go head-to-head with Connorley a lot on the edge. I wonder how much they're going to help the rookie in his first start at right tackle.
I would anticipate early helpage, right, just to get your feet wet, just to make sure that, there's comfort there, and then they'll assess, right? I mean, there's going to have to be a time where you got to single block somebody. It's the league, dude. Just whether it's an audible to it, whether it's a check to it, whether it's by design, whether it's supposed to be something quick or otherwise, you're going to have to deal with Brian Burns. I think you touched on it very well. I mean, you look at some of the ancillary numbers, 17 tackles for losses, a whole mess of quarterback hits, some pressures there. He was really, really good, even if the overall sack numbers kind of belie that, where you go 8.5, there's a lot of 8.5 guys. I'm telling you, he's effective. And you can't just say, okay, well, isolate on him, because enter Abdul Carter, we'll talk about in a second, and Dexter Lawrence, one of the better players in football.
So let's move inside then to that point. I'm guessing Nick Allegretti is going to start. I've been saying I thought it was going to be Andrew Wiley to kick down to guard if Connorley plays every snap at right tackle, which just based on the depth chart they put out, if you believe that at all, then Connorley is going to go without any kind of a rotation. But in an event where Connorley's your full-time right tackle this weekend, and then Allegretti starts at right guard, as the year went on last year, I thought his play fell off some at left guard, but he's going to have to deal with Dexter Lawrence a lot. That, to me, is the worst matchup in this game. You can help Connorley a bunch. You can chip. You can do things, as you're pointing out, with Burns to try to prohibit him from taking over the game. Lawrence is a better player anyway, though. And on the inside, the quicker path to Jaden Daniels, who, for all of his brilliance last year, is still a high-pressure-to-sack ratio guy. They're not. Oftentimes, if you get pressure, you're going to get him down to the ground. I worry about that part of it, the interior pressure from Lawrence working on Allegretti, and Brandon Coleman in his first ever start at guard, as good as I think he's eventually going to be as well. That is a big concern for me. Abdul Carter, star, going to be the defensive rookie of the year, I think. But my guess is he'll also rush from the interior. They're going to kick him inside because how else do you get Thibodeau on the field with Burns and with Carter if Carter's not moving inside some?
Yeah, I mean, in the way that in the old days, you think about defense where who lines up at the left end, who lines up at the right end, and let's see what happens. You're going to mix and match. You're going to move guys around. Now, what you can do if you're Cliff Kingsbury and company, you kind of run some of your tempo stuff. You don't let them substitute. If you feel like you've got a set of matchups that you like, or you want to try to run Dexter Lawrence ragged by going old school, running a bunch of stretch plays and a bunch of outside runs and get right back to the line of scrimmage and go again, maybe that's something to do there. But, yeah, if you let them kind of, dictate where you're doing a sub package, then they can too. And as you mentioned, Kayvon Thibodeau, who has destroyed Washington in his career. I mean, last year, for example, you didn't give up a ton of sacks to Dexter Lawrence, or any, quite frankly, but by far his most tackles, how active he was, came against Washington. So think of the run game, think of some of the stuffs. I mean, he is wildly effective, and you have to pay attention to him, which gives some one-on-one matchups, in theory, to those defensive ends.
Yeah, and sacks aren't the way, I don't think anyway, to monitor Dexter Lawrence as it is. If you look at his double-team rate last year, it was the highest in the NFL.
I believe that.
You got 4 hands on him at all times. That was like clearly almost a 70% double-team rate for him last season on passing downs, which was the highest of the next-gen stats era for people not named like Aaron Donald or J.J. Watt, who we were talking about earlier today. The last one I want to bring up, Malik Nabers. The numbers for Malik Nabers last year were extraordinary against Washington. I mean, these are wild. I'm going to run through these and just read some of these for you. So in 2 games last season against the Commanders, Malik Nabers was targeted 29 times.
Yeah.
2 games.
Mm-hmm.
That's 15 per just about. He caught 19 balls for 186 yards and a touchdown. Malik Nabers was targeted in Game 1 against Washington 55% of the time, which is unheard of on the routes he ran. Week 2 was even more staggering. 69% of the routes he ran, they targeted him on. You just don't see that. That was the most in a game by a receiver since 2016 when they started tracking this kind of data. I say that to say I think they liked the matchup a lot last year, probably more even than they do this year. There's no Emmanuel Forbes or Benjamin St. Juste
or Michael Davis.
Yeah, out there just being feasted on by Malik Nabers. But you know you're going to get some man coverage. They want to run more of it. They actually ran the 5th most man coverage in the NFL last year under Joe Witt Jr., and now that they have better personnel, I think that number could even go up this season. So I can't wait to see how their corners handle Nabers. And do they travel Marshawn Lattimore? He was traveling in the playoffs with A.J. Brown. He was traveling with Mike Evans. It didn't go great, but he was. Do they move him around with Nabers? Do they feel good about Trey Amos to just let him go one-on-one with a Pro Bowl wide receiver in his first game? That's going to be fun for me.
When you look at Nabers' numbers, that's easy for me to say. There are 2 teams he feasted against like none other, Washington and Dallas. What did they have in common last year? Some pretty porous pass defenses, I would say. That was a theme there. So 20 catches, 184 yards against Dallas on the season, 19 for $186 and a touchdown against Washington. You're hoping, as you could see, some of the priority in this offseason was, yes, some beef up front to stop the run on first down, but secondarily was the secondary, right? They made some adjustments and some upgrades and some changes there. You know, enter Marshawn Lattimore late last season, hoping he's himself, or at least the guy that he was a handful of years ago. You enter Trey Amos, Jonathan Jones, year 2 for Mikey Sanders still, the growth of guys like Quan Martin and company. You feel better at this point now than you did last year.